Helen set her suitcase down and stepped into the living room, barely through the door when Michael looked up from the couch with a grin far too pleased. "Welcome back," he said, casually stretching like nothing had happened. Something about his tone made her stomach drop. "What's with the smile?" she asked, warily. He stood, clearly enjoying the build business move. He said, "I sold your jewelry collection." The words didn't land at first. "You what?" she asked, voice tight. "All of it," he confirmed smugly. "Those pieces were just collecting dust. Now they're funding my new company. You'll thank me later." Helen stood frozen, her jaw clenched. That collection held generations of memories. Michael thought he'd outsmarted her, but what he didn't know was that she'd hidden tiny tracking chips in her most valuable pieces. "I'm Helen Parker, wife, heir to my family's legacy, and the last person my husband should have underestimated. Ever trusted someone so much, only to find they were building their dreams by destroying yours?" Helen Parker had always been someone who valued meaning over material. Each piece in her jewelry collection wasn't just beautiful, it carried a story, a legacy. The sapphire ring had belonged to her grandmother, passed down on her 80th birthday, with a handwritten note about strength and survival. The diamond bracelet was her mother's, worn on her wedding day, and later gifted to Helen with a kiss and a tea. And the delicate gold pendant. Helen had bought that one for herself the day she landed her dream job, a symbol of independence and pride. She kept the collection in a velvet-lined box inside her bedroom armoire, rarely worn, but lovingly preserved. They were reminders of where she came from and the women who shaped her. 3 years ago, Helen met Michael at a business conference. He was confident, witty, and full of vision, exactly the kind of man who seemed destined to build something big. He talked about investments, startups, breaking through barriers. At first, Helen was drawn to his energy. He said all the right things and painted a future where their strengths complemented each other. She believed in him. Their relationship moved quickly. Michael swept her off her feet with grand gestures, dinners at rooftop restaurants, spontaneous weekend getaways, whispered promises about building a life of meaning and success. When he proposed, Helen said yes without hesitation. It felt like the next chapter of a fairy tale. But the fairy tale faded quickly. After the honeymoon, Michael's ambition revealed a sharper edge. He was always moving, always reaching, never satisfied. Helen started to notice how dismissive he became when she spoke about her work or her passions. He teased her gently at first, then more pointedly. "It's cute, but not exactly scalable." He rolled his eyes when she brought up family heirlooms. "That old stuff? It's just clutter." She brushed it off, thinking he didn't understand the value of tradition. She tried to explain, tried to share the history behind each piece. But Michael never listened long enough to care. Over time, he grew more distant. His trips became more frequent, his phone more guarded. He stopped including her in his plans. Whenever she asked questions, he called her insecure. "You've got to trust me," he'd say, with a tight smile. "You worry too much." Helen wanted to believe he was under stress, that all of this, the coldness, the condescension, was just temporary. So she gave him space, hoping he'd come back to her. She kept focusing on her work, her family, her home. But when she heard about a string of local burglaries targeting high-end homes, something in her stirred. Her instincts told her to protect what mattered. Quietly, without telling Michael, she had a jeweler embed tiny tracking devices in her most valuable pieces, just in case. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. She never imagined she'd use those trackers to find out her husband had stolen from her. She never thought the man she married, the man who'd promised her a future, would treat her past like it was disposable. But now, as she stood in their living room facing the smug grin on Michael's face, Helen understood something she hadn't before. Michael wasn't just ambitious. He was careless, selfish, dangerous, and worst of all, He thought she wouldn't fight back. Helen shut the bedroom door behind her, the click of the latch loud in the silence. Her hands trembled as she approached the armoire. She pulled open the drawer where her jewelry box had always been. It was gone. The space felt gaping, hollow, as if a part of her had been ripped away. Her breath caught in her throat. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical, a wound without blood. She lowered herself onto the bed, trying to stop her mind from spiraling, but the anger, the confusion, the heartbreak, they all collided inside her like a storm. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. Michael didn't just sell jewelry. He sold pieces of her grandmother's love, her mother's grace, her own pride. And he did it with a smirk. Helen reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out her old phone, the one her father had helped her configure years ago. When she told him about her jewelry collection, he insisted she install a private tracking system, just in case. She'd thought he was being overprotective. Now, she was grateful beyond words. Opening the app, her eyes scanned the screen. Red dots lit up a digital map of the city. Each one represented a piece of her collection. Her heart pounded. The sapphire necklace was currently at a high-end consignment store downtown. The diamond bracelet, logged at a warehouse near the industrial district. A gold pendant. Her pendant was in transit. The timestamp showed it had been moved the very morning she returned from her trip. Helen sat frozen for a moment, absorbing what the data confirmed. Michael hadn't just impulsively sold her belongings. This had been premeditated. He waited for her to leave town, then moved fast. This wasn't about dust or storage or convenience. This was theft. She reached for her phone and called the one person she could trust with everything, Megan. When Megan answered, Helen didn't even say hello. Michael sold my jewelry. What? What are you talking about? All of it, Helen said, her voice low but steady. He said it was funding his next big venture, like it was his to use, like it didn't matter. There was a pause, and then Megan let out a curse. You've got to be kidding me. Helen, that collection. I know, and listen, there's more. The tracking devices. They're active. I know exactly where the pieces are. Megan didn't hesitate. You have to go to the police. Helen nodded, even though Megan couldn't see her. I will. First thing in the morning. This isn't just about some jewelry, Helen. He stole your history. I know, she whispered. And I'm not letting him get away with it. As she hung up, Helen looked back at the glowing map, those red dots like tiny flames across the city. She felt a surge of clarity through the grief. Michael thought he'd won. He thought he was untouchable. But Helen still had something he didn't. Proof. And now she had a plan. The next morning, Helen walked into the police station, phone in hand and nerves coiled tight. She approached the front desk and asked to speak with someone about a theft. After a short wait, she was ushered into a small office where a plainclothes officer sat behind a cluttered desk. His badge read, Detective Carter. Can I help you today, ma'am? He asked, his tone calm but attentive. Helen took a deep breath and opened the tracking app on her phone. My husband sold my jewelry collection without my consent. Some of it's heirloom pieces from my mother, grandmother, and some I purchased myself. I embedded tracking devices in the most valuable items, and they're still active. Carter raised an eyebrow. You have real-time tracking? The county said, handing him her phone. And I've created a full inventory item descriptions, photos, and approximate values. She pulled out a folder from her bag and slid it across the desk. He scanned the documents, then looked at the blinking red dots on her screen. You came prepared. That's going to help a lot. Over the next few days, Carter and his team cross-referenced the data with known locations. One bracelet was verified at a high-end consignment shop. A ring was found registered in a private auction house database. A pendant was traced to a secure warehouse linked to a jewelry wholesaler. The store owners cooperated after learning the items were flagged as potentially stolen. Helen felt a rush of relief, but also a deep, gnawing anger. This was happening. Her past was being recovered piece by piece. Then, just as she started to feel progress, Detective Carter called with a different tone in his voice. "Mrs. Parker, I need to share something with you," he began. "While investigating the transactions related to the jewelry, we ran Michael's business accounts for context, and we've come across some troubling patterns." Helen's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of patterns?" "Usual wire transfers, overlapping withdrawals, and a few red flags that suggest more than just personal asset sales. It looks like some of the money from the jewelry was funneled into accounts that are already under quiet observation for potential fraud." Helen's stomach dropped. "Are you saying he's involved in something illegal?" "We can't confirm yet," Carter said, "but we've initiated a financial crimes review. The evidence suggests this may go beyond stolen property. If he used those funds to cover or mask illegal financial activity, he could be facing far more serious charges." The betrayal deepened in Helen's chest like a stone sinking into water. She thought Michael's actions were selfish, maybe even cruel. But this was criminal. It wasn't just about what he'd taken from her personally. He may have been using her inheritance to cover up a fraudulent empire. As she ended the call, Helen sat in silence, staring at the wall. The jewelry theft was just the beginning. Michael hadn't just betrayed her trust. He might have built his success on deception, and now, everything was unraveling. That evening, Helen sat in the living room, her heart thudding in her chest as she waited. The legal documents from the police station were spread across the coffee table. Her laptop was open to the tracking app, still showing the blinking locations of her stolen jewelry. She heard Michael's key in the door and stood up, arms crossed. He entered with his usual casual confidence, tossing his keys into the bowl by the door. "What's for dinner?" he asked, already pulling off his jacket. Helen didn't move. "We need to talk. Now." Michael's brow furrowed. "What is it this time?" "I know everything, Michael," she said, voice steady. "The jewelry, where it went, who has it. The police know too." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I went to the police. I showed them the tracking data. They're opening a case against you." For a beat, Michael stood frozen. Then he scoffed, forcing a laugh. "You're joking." Helen shook her head. "No, this is real. Detective Carter has already started recovering the items. And that's not all. Your financial accounts are under investigation too." Michael's face drained of color. He quickly shifted into his usual defense, arrogance. "You went behind my back? You brought the police into this? Do you even understand what you've done?" "Michael," Helen said sharply, "do you understand what you've done? You stole from me. You lied. You used my inheritance to cover your mess. And now, you're being exposed." "You always dramatize everything," he snapped. "You couldn't just talk to me like an adult." "This is your idea of justice?" "You made the choice," Helen replied, voice rising. "You chose ambition over respect, greed over partnership. You don't get to play the victim now." Michael's mask slipped. His expression turned hostile. "You're going to regret this. You've just destroyed everything we built." Helen stared at him, suddenly calm. "No, Michael. You destroyed it the moment you decided my legacy was yours to sell." Michael stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Later that night, Helen called Megan. Her best friend answered on the first ring. "What happened?" Helen told her everything. The confrontation, Michael's reaction, the police updates. "I'm proud of you," Megan said. "But you need to protect yourself now. I have a contact family law and financial recovery. She'll know what to do. The next morning, Helen sat across from the attorney in a downtown office. The lawyer, a sharp, composed woman named Rachel Monroe, listened intently as Helen recounted the events. "You've already done the hard part," Rachel said. "Now let's make sure this doesn't destroy your financial future." By the end of the meeting, they had started paperwork to freeze shared accounts and initiate divorce proceedings. Rachel would begin tracing Michael's financial activity through both business and personal channels. That afternoon, Detective Carter called again. "I've confirmed multiple fraudulent transfers from your husband's accounts," he said. "He's facing possible charges for tax evasion, embezzlement, and misuse of business funds." Helen closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. "What does that mean for me?" "You're not implicated," Carter assured her. "But you'll need to provide any documents or communications you have that could support the investigation. This is growing quickly." After she hung up, Helen sat in silence. All the pieces had fallen into place. The theft, the lies, the manipulation. She hadn't just married a selfish man. She had unknowingly married a criminal. That evening, as she filled out the first pages of the divorce petition, Helen didn't feel broken. She felt clear. Michael's empire was crumbling, and she was taking her life back, one signature at a time. Helen didn't waste a second. With Rachel's guidance, she filed an emergency motion to freeze all shared financial accounts and business ties. Every joint credit card, investment account, and real estate contract was locked down. Rachel coordinated with financial institutions to protect Helen's remaining assets, ensuring that Michael couldn't drain another dollar. Rachel could have signed off on a formal self-theft claim, attaching the tracking data, receipts, and verified police documentation. The paper trail was airtight, and Rachel made sure of it. Meanwhile, Megan had an idea of her own. She'd always been protective of Helen and wasn't about to let Michael slip through the cracks of the justice system or the public eye. She contacted a local blogger who specialized in personal finance scandals and anonymously leaked the details. Wife's family heirloom startup. Within hours, the post gained traction. The next morning, it hit a national media outlet under the headline, "Husband sells wife's heirlooms to fund fraud empire." Helen was initially stunned when she saw the article, but when she opened the comments section, what she found wasn't pity, it was overwhelming support. Thousands of people expressed outrage on her behalf. Women shared their own stories of financial betrayal. Advocacy groups reposted the article. The public wasn't just watching, they were rallying behind her. Michael, of course, tried to spin it. He gave a statement to a local reporter, calling the incident a simple misunderstanding, and describing Helen as emotionally unstable due to marital tension. He claimed he sold the jewelry with permission, and that the money went toward a joint vision for their future. But it didn't stay. The comments turned savage. No one was buying it. The evidence was too strong, too clear. And Helen's calm silence only made her stronger in the public eye. She didn't engage with Michael publicly. She didn't respond to media requests. She let the facts and the justice system do the talking. A week later, Helen received a call from Detective Carter. "Michael's being brought in today," he said. "We're filing multiple counts: theft, fraud, unauthorized asset transfer, and now tax evasion based on our expanded investigation." Helen sat on the edge of her couch, phone pressed to her ear. "So it's finally happening?" Carter confirmed. "We've got all we need. He won't be able to charm his way out of this one." That evening, the news aired footage of Michael being escorted out of his office building in handcuffs. He wore his usual designer suit, but his face was pale, his jaw tight. No smug smile. No spin. Just silence as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Helen watched from her living room, the glow of the television illuminating her composed face. Megan sat beside her, wineglass in hand. "Taliant justice," Megan said, lifting her glass. Helen gave a quiet nod. "To freedom." Over the following days, more of her jewelry pieces were recovered. The sapphire ring from her grandmother, the diamond bracelet her mother wore on her wedding day, even the gold pendant she had gifted herself after landing her first major promotion. Each item was returned in evidence bags, labeled and catalogued. Helen placed them carefully in a new velvet-lined box, this time locked in a safe only she had access to. But it wasn't just the physical items that returned. It was something deeper. A sense of self that Michael had spent years eroding. Every insult, every dismissal of her values, every backhanded comment about how she clung too tightly to the past. It all faded in the face of this new reality. Helen was no longer playing defense. She was in control. Her phone buzzed again, another email from Rachel. The divorce proceedings were moving quickly thanks to the mounting criminal charges against Michael. There was already a motion on file to ensure Helen was not held responsible for any debts tied to his fraudulent business activity. And the press? They had turned her into a quiet hero. Women's advocacy groups reached out to feature her story. Financial watchdog blogs praised her for taking swift legal action. She'd become a symbol, not of victimhood, but of resilience. And Helen? She didn't need the spotlight. She just needed to breathe. One afternoon, as she stood in front of the mirror placing the sapphire ring back on her finger, she didn't see the past. She saw a woman reborn, unshaken, unapologetic, unafraid. Michael's downfall was swift. Once the charges were filed, news of his arrest spread across financial and legal circles like wildfire. His so-called empire, built on stolen trust and fraudulent money, began to collapse from within. Investors panicked and withdrew support. Business partners distanced themselves. Clients canceled contracts. The sleek website that once boasted about innovation and honest growth was quietly taken down. And in boardrooms where his name had once opened doors, it now closed them. Meanwhile, Helen received a call from Detective Carter. "I've recovered the final batch of your jewelry," he said, "including the pendant you told us about, the one you bought after your first big promotion." When Helen picked up the pieces from the precinct, the emotion caught her off guard. Seeing them again felt like finding old parts of herself. The sapphire ring, the diamond bracelet, the pendant. They weren't just accessories. They were chapters of her life returned to her hands. The story gained traction again in the press. What began as a headline faded into something deeper. News outlets called it the Sapphire Justice Case. One article wrote, "A woman's heirlooms became the key to unraveling her husband's empire of lies." Helen didn't seek the spotlight, but it found her anyway. Then came the letters. Emails, handwritten notes, messages in comment sections. Women from across the country reached out. Strangers who had also been financially manipulated by partners, who had watched their security, their dignity, and their trust dissolve in the name of someone else's ambition. They thanked Helen for going public, for proving that reclaiming what's yours isn't just about property. It's about reclaiming power. Some of the letters brought her to tears, others gave her strength, but all of them made her realize something profound. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a mirror for so many others. Michael, sensing the shift, tried to reach out. An email came first. "We need to talk. Things got out of hand." Then a voicemail. "Helen, I'm sorry. I was under pressure. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Helen didn't respond. She forwarded everything to her attorney, then blocked his number. There would be no more access, no more conversations where he twisted guilt or feigned innocence, no more open doors for him to walk through. Rachel helped her file a final financial separation motion. Every shared liability was split off. Any remaining joint accounts were dissolved. Helen would no longer be tied to his name in any way that mattered. The court granted it without delay. Her legal identity was hers again. That night, Helen poured herself a glass of wine, and walked through her house slowly. Everything looked the same: furniture, walls, shelves, but it felt different. Like the weight in the air had finally lifted. For the first time in years, her home felt like her sanctuary, not a stage for manipulation. She walked to the new jewelry case she'd installed, a secure, beautifully crafted display cabinet with a lock only she knew the code to. As she opened it and placed the last recovered piece inside, she smiled. Not because the battle was over, but because she had chosen herself. And won. Helen stood in front of the display case she had installed in her home office, cradling the sapphire ring between her fingers. It had been her grandmother's, a symbol of strength and grace, passed down through generations. Now, it was more than a family heirloom. It was a monument to everything she had fought to protect and reclaim. She placed it carefully into a shadow box and sealed it behind glass. Just beneath it, engraved in a brass plate, was the quote she'd chosen. "He tried to take everything. Instead, he gave me back my power." It wasn't just words, it was truth. In the weeks that followed, Helen found herself rebuilding, not from ruin, but from clarity. She began donating, quietly and without recognition, to women's shelters that supported survivors of financial abuse. Her name never appeared on the donor lists, but her contributions helped fund legal assistance and emergency housing for those escaping manipulation. She knew exactly how vital those lifelines could be. One afternoon, she was invited to attend a workshop on economic freedom for women. She didn't speak the first few times, just listened. The stories she heard echoed her own in ways that felt haunting and healing all at once. Eventually, she shared her journey, not as a victim, but as someone who had come out the other side. Her honesty struck a chord, and she was asked to return as a guest speaker. Each time she stood in front of a room full of women reclaiming their lives, she felt more whole. With her finances stabilized and legal affairs handled, Helen returned to work. Her old boss welcomed her back without question. She walked into the office with quiet confidence, her head held high. She wasn't just the woman who used to work there. She was the woman who had taken her life back from the edge of betrayal. Her coworkers noticed the difference, the way she spoke with purpose, the strength behind her words. Helen wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She simply watched her home, once tainted by tension and deceit, became her sanctuary again. She repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, replaced anything that carried the shadow of Michael. Peace settled into every corner, soft and steady. And then she booked the trip. Italy had always been a dream. She'd shelved year after year while Michael insisted they couldn't afford it, or that it was impractical, or that her dreams should wait. Now, nothing waited. She booked the flight, packed lightly, and flew across the Atlantic with a heart full of nervous excitement. That first night in Florence, after walking cobblestone streets lit by golden street lamps, Helen sat on her balcony with a glass of wine and her journal. She opened it, pen in hand, and wrote with clear conviction. "I am no longer who I was. I'm stronger, wiser, and free." She closed the journal and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, the future belonged only to her. The morning air was crisp as Helen sat on her patio, coffee mug in hand, wrapped in a soft shawl. The breeze rustled the leaves in the garden she'd recently replanted, new life blooming where so much had withered. Just inside, hanging on the wall of her office, the shadow box gleamed in the sunlight. The sapphire ring sat centered, engraved quote below it catching the light. Her phone buzzed. Megan's name lit up on the screen. Helen answered with a smile. "Morning." Megan's voice was bright. "So, what's next for Helen Parker?" Helen looked out across her yard, the quiet peace surrounding her. Then she smiled wider. "Anything I want." She hung up and stood, walking back into the house. As she passed the hallway mirror, the diamond bracelet on her wrist shimmered. Her fingers brushed it gently. Her mother's bracelet, the one worn on her wedding day, the one nearly lost forever. Now, It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a promise, a reminder, a legacy reclaimed. She paused by the shadow box and looked up at it once more. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Dad. You always knew how to protect me." With a deep breath, Helen turned toward the future, steady, calm, and unafraid. The storm had passed, and in its place, a woman had risen, not just surviving, but thriving.